There, Swami
Yes, Swamiji is come.
Purnakum, the chanters of the Purnakum can please stand. Let's welcome Swamiji. Please hold the Kalash also. Roma is holding the Kalash. We'll just spin that.
Om न कर्मणा न प्रजया धनेन त्यागेन ऐक्ये अमृतत्वान् शुः परेण नाकं निहितं गुहायां विभ्राजते यत्यतयो विशन्ति
वेदांत विज्ञान सुनिश्चितार्था संन्यास योगाधतय शुद्ध सत्व आहा ते ब्रह्मलोकेषु परांत काले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ति सर्वे
दहरं विपापं परमेश्वभूतयत् पुण्डरीकं पुरमत्यसग्रस्थं तत्रापि दहरं गगनं विशोकस्तस्मिन् यदन्तस्तुपासितव्यम्
यो वेदादो स्वरप्रोक्तो वेदान्ते च प्रतिष्ठितः तस्य प्रकृतिलीनस्य यः परस महेश्वरः
श्री
सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय।
ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जलिशलाकया चक्षुरुमीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुदेवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परब्रह्मा तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। स्थावरं जङ्गमं व्याप्तं यत्किञ्चित् सचराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चिन्मयं व्यापि यत् सर्वं त्रैलोक्यं सचराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। सर्वश्रुतिशिरोरत्न विराजितो पदाम्बुजः वेदान्तात्मजसूर्यो य तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। चैतन्य शाश्वत शान्तो व्योमातीतो निरञ्जनः बिन्दुनाद कलातीत तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः।
ज्ञान शक्ति समारूढ़ः तत्वमाला विभूषितः भुक्ति मुक्ति प्रदाता च तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। अनेक जन्म संप्राप्त कर्म बंध विदाहिने आत्मज्ञान प्रदानेन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। शोषणं भवसिन्धुश्च ज्ञापनं सारसम्पदः गुरोर्पादोदकं दं सम्यक् तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। न गुरोरधिकं तत्त्वं न गुरोरधिकं तपः तत्त्वज्ञानात् परं नास्ति तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। मन्नाथ श्री जगन्नाथ मद्गुरु श्री जगद्गुरु मदात्मा सर्वभूतात्मा तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। गुरुरादिरनादिश्च गुरुर्परम दैवतं गुरुर्परतरं नास्ति तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव, त्वमेव बन्धु च सखा त्वमेव, त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव, त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव, त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव।
समस्त जन कल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्।
Hari Om Swamiji. Thank you so much for today's agreeing for today's topic, and we're looking forward. Today we have the five classes. No, yeah, five classes. Gita's the class that Geeta Kothari takes, then the Tuesday class that Vinita ji takes, and my Monday morning class, the Thursday one at Ajay's office, and the Saturday one at Ajay Anuja's house. So 5 classes today, Swamiji.
Okay. So, Om Shri Tapovana Paramagurave Namaha. Om Shri Chinmaya Sadgurave Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Om Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam. Namami Chinmayam Devam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram. Hari Om and salutations to one and all. Happy to be once again with all of you. And congratulations to all the Sevikas. You have been able to retain your classes and inspire them. And have any more people from any of your classes become Sevikas or Sevaks?
No, not yet. Reena used to be part of my class, who's a Sevika, but she's not in the class anymore. She just, in the lockdown, she had to quit. And hoping for some Sevaks and Sevikas, trying to get them to agree. That's the
Ritika,
challenge, Swamiji.
Ritika is there, Swamiji.
She was already taking one
Ritika,
class, no?
she's taking 2 classes, Swamiji.
2 classes.
Yeah.
But that was not within this 1 year, no? She has started earlier, right? Between my last Devi group visit and today, any new Sevak Sevikas have emerged from these classes is just what I wanted to know.
Not even.
So that will be my condition for next year's class. Some of you have to become Sevak Sevikas so that it helps in your sadhana also, and you can reach out to more new people. Because 3 books you have done, no? Kindle Life or Self Unfoldment 1, Bhajagovindam 2, Tattva Bodh or Atma Bodh. This much you would have done definitely all classes. Bas, so Gurudev.
Viji, Roma is prepping. She's agreed. She's becoming a Sevika. So this has happened in the past 1 year.
She's ready to take the class. She has to start one, right? With somebody.
Yeah, she has to start. She's already started prepping.
So good.
With Vinita.
More of you should take it up. It's a good sadhana. And until you don't take the plunge, you won't know the benefit of it. There's nothing to lose except some doubts, confusions, and ignorance in our mind, which is anyway what we want to do. And don't think that you will make other person confused. All of us are anyway confused. So even if you don't take a class, confusion is anyway there in everybody's mind. So start. That's all. All right. So our topic is 2 parts of the topic: how to do Shravanam and Mananam. And then second part is about how to intensify Vairagya. Is that the topic? Or
Yes, Swamiji. That was what the topics.
all right. So Shravanam actually is the main sadhana in the Jnana sadhana actually. And in fact, all knowledge we gain only by listening. If somebody says, no, Swamiji, I read also. How did you know that word? Suppose we read here. Is there not anything permanent? How did you know how to pronounce that? Somebody would have spoken and you heard, then you know how to pronounce, then you are able to read. So primary source of knowledge for every field is listening. And that's why they say Bhagwan gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. So we listen more and speak less. And in the Shanti mantra also, it starts with Bhadram Karnebhi Shunuyama. We listen to what is auspicious. So listening is very important. And in fact, the Siddhanta of Upanishad is, if we listen with a prepared mind, knowledge happens instantly, immediately, then and there. There is no requirement of reflection and contemplation. The Uttam Adhikari, the highest level of seeker, realizes the truth immediately. Seekers who are there, some of such seekers who are depicted are Nachiketa in the Kathopanishad, the seeker of the Kenopanishad, the seeker in the Mundakopanishad, Ashtavakra Gita, like that. These are examples of seekers who are Uttam Adhikaris. Knowledge happens instantly. But that is with a prepared mind, the mind which is single pointed, which is selfless, ego pressure is less, vasana pressure is less. Such a mind, when it listens to Vedanta, immediately one is able to let go of the false notions about oneself. When we are not at that level, then we need listening, reflection, contemplation, all the 3 disciplines, Shravan, Manan and Nididhyasan. In that, what should be our attitude when we listen? Because the reflection comes only after listening. If our listening is not proper, our reflection also will be wrong. Because in listening, there are different types of listening. Some people listen not to determine the truth. They listen to prove the opposite person wrong. They are there only to find faults. There are some people who listen to get a particular confirmation of their behavior. Oh, this is what I do. See, scriptures are saying this, so it's all right. So there's nothing wrong in enjoyment. Don't get attached to it. Now they will take, there's nothing wrong in enjoyment. And they will say, see, there is no problem. Why should we live in self-control? We can enjoy. Because they are taking it only selectively. That's called selective listening. Some people listen because they want to tell other person that what I was telling you was correct. So in between the talk, many times they nudge. See, I was telling you that. Now he's saying that. Listen carefully. So there are different ways by which people listen. When we listen to Vedanta, what should be our attitude? So there is filtered listening, factual listening, passive listening, active listening, the different types of listening. What is the spiritual seeker's attitude while listening? First and foremost, one has to listen as though one is listening to it for the first time. What does that mean? Listen to it for the first time. Meaning listen to it without preconceived notions. With an open mind. Even if I know the subject. See, some people are not interested in truth. They are interested in new expressions of the truth. Or some story, some joke, some anecdote, some humor. So they take that. Because they say truth we know. After all, what is the truth? We are Brahman, world is an illusion. That is the truth. Beyond that, what is going to be said? What was interesting is some story, some anecdote, some jokes, the way in which it was presented. Then our attention has gone to those things, not on the truth. So the spiritual seeker listens with an open mind to determine the essence. That is the first point in Shravanam. That what is the essence? Technically, Shravanam is defined like that. Shravanam nama tatparya avadharanam. Shravanam is to determine the essence. What is the essence? Suppose we study a whole book, let us say any Upanishad or one chapter of the Gita or even one shloka. What is the crux of that? If I determine clearly that this is the essence, that means I have done Shravanam properly. Whether it's in a study class or whether I'm reading an article or I'm listening to a speaker talking, whatever it may be. It can be applied to anything. It can be applied to a song, to a poetry, anything. But I should determine what is the essence. With an open mind, if I listen and determine the essence, then I have done Shravanam properly. One thing that helps is to identify this, that after today's class, meaning whenever you have a study class or whenever you are doing your swadhyaya, you are reading by yourself, once you finish that, close it and sit and bring to your mind what was the essence, what was being communicated as the main message. Then I have done listening properly. What is my take home comes after that. Because what happens many times is, out of the talk, some 5-7 points, suppose they are covered in the talk, something that appeals to me, maybe 1 or 2 points, that may be my take home. But that need not be the essence of the talk. So if I want to listen carefully, I should know how to determine the essence, then I have done Shravanam properly. That is first point. Listen with an open mind, as though you are listening for the first time, and determine the essence. First method, first aspect of listening. Second aspect of listening is, there are 3 things that create obstructions. See, externally there are many things which can create disturbances. So the environment is very important. So we sit in an environment which is not distractive, then listening can happen well. So I'm not covering external obstacles, I'm covering internal obstacles. In Tulsi Ramayan, in the Aranyakand, this portion comes, Ram Gita, where Lakshmanji is asking some questions to Bhagwan Ram. Before Bhagwan answers Lakshmanji, he tells him how to listen. Sunahu tat man mati chitlai. Bring 3 things together and listen. That is called listening with single pointed attention. Bring your mind there. What is the meaning of bring your mind there? Means emotionally be present there. Many times our emotion is not engaged in this. Especially if you are listening to any katha or any description about Bhagwan, his leelas, his glories, etc., then emotion will be engaged. If I am listening to Vedant, then what is the emotion that is engaged? How can I engage emotions if I am listening to Vedant? Anyone? No one? See, bhakti is that which engages the emotion. Shastra bhakti, what we have now in this 4-fold qualifications, one of the qualifications is Shraddha. Guru Vedanta Vakyadishu Vishwasa Shraddha. The faith in the teacher and the scripture, that what they are saying is true. So the bhakti towards the Guru towards the scripture, and of course through that towards Ishvara, will engage our emotion. That what my teacher is saying, suppose you are reading Gurudev's commentary. So what Gurudev is saying, I have Shraddha in Gurudev, his life, I have devotion towards Gurudev. Then with full emotion, I will try to absorb my mind as well as my thinking together while I'm reading. Otherwise, my emotion is for something else. Intellectually, I'm reading. There is no integration. That is called disintegrated personality. So Ishwar Bhakti, Guru Bhakti, Shastra Bhakti, either of these three or all the three can be combined. It will be there as the base for listening. Because concentration comes when there is emotional involvement. If emotional involvement is not there, mind will wander. Then listening is not proper, which is what happens many times in our sadhana also. When we do japa or meditation or puja, what happens is emotions are not anchored. We are doing it either mechanically, or we are doing it because it's a formality, or we are doing it in a hurry, and emotion is not engaged. We don't feel. So bhavana is important. So when he says bring your mind here, it means have the bhav. One more way emotion can be engaged is the feeling of vairagya or moksha, mumukshutva. That I want mukti, so I'm listening. Because why am I listening? Am I listening to make my life better as a finite individual, which is also fine, there's nothing wrong in that? Or am I listening because I want to know who am I? With what intensity I want to know that truth. That forms the emotion and its engagement while listening. See, it is like this, that story, beautiful story. So one disciple came to the teacher and he asked that I have been staying in this ashram for so long and I have been listening to you and I have been doing my sadhana, but why is it that I have not realized God yet? So the guru kept silent, he didn't say anything. So the disciple thought maybe my question was wrong, or maybe I should ask at some other point in time. So he let it be. He didn't pursue it further. After a few days, both of them, they have gone for their early morning, taking bath in the river and doing Sandhya Vandan and all that. When the disciple took a dip, instantly the guru held his hand on the head of the devotee and kept him inside only, kept him pushed there. Devotee is trying everything to come out, but the guru is not allowing him to come out, and he was suffocating like anything inside. And when it was just unbearable, that is the time the guru left and he came out panting, took the breath. Then he said, why did you do this? The guru said, you asked me a question, no? He said, but you didn't answer me. If you didn't know the answer, you should have told me. I would have gone somewhere. Why are you trying to kill me? He said, this is your answer. What were you thinking when you were in the water? He said, I just wanted to breathe. Did you want anything else? You want enjoyment? You wanted fame? You want glory? You want some person to be in your life? What do you want? He said, I just want to breathe. I wanted to live. That's it. He said, that intensity has to come when you are listening. You will realize then and there. So what is my objective of listening? If my objective is I want to know the truth. See, what happens is there are lots of layers of conditioning in our mind. That is a problem. So when we listen, sometimes we listen to get some knowledge, but deep down the notion is, अब सुनने से थोड़ी ज्ञान होने वाला है, ऐसे ही थोड़ी ज्ञान हो जाएगा. So there is one conditioning, or one feels in one lecture I can't realize. These are what we call subconscious, unconscious thoughts which are there inside. Though we are learning about Upanishad, in one statement the disciple realizes, in one word disciple realizes, sometimes in one glance of the guru disciple realizes. But somewhere in our mind it will be, ऐसे थोड़ी होता है. And this, our mind takes us for a royal ride in everything. राम राम जपने से थोड़ी कोई साक्षात्कार हो जाएगा, as though भगवान राम is going to appear just like that. So inherent belief system itself is contradicting to what my purpose is. So how will that manifestation happen? Gurudev used to call it cancellation of thoughts. He used to say that in the conscious mind level, that we entertain contradictory thoughts in our mind. We want to wake up early also, but then we also love to sleep for a long time, and so then we entertain contradictory thoughts. But here we are talking even at subconscious level, that is there in our mind, that I am not going to realize the truth. So our listening is not with the attitude that today I am listening and I may realize the truth. See, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, every day he used to worship Mother Kali, with the feeling today I will have darshan of Mother Kali. And when he doesn't have in the whole day, in the evening he would feel sad, oh, one more day passed, but I didn't get the darshan of Mother Kali. But again next day when he starts the prayer, again he starts with the same bhav. That is the attitude which we have to listen with. So that is called engaging the emotion. That with what intensity I am listening. So first is to listen with an open mind, with to determine the essence. Second is engage the emotion, listen with as much intensity as possible, removing all this barriers to listening, these wrong notions in our mind. Because the fact is, we don't have to become the truth, we are the truth. That's what Vedanta is telling us. So all we have to do is remove the obstacles to that truth. So this is called engaging the mind. Sunahu tat man. Second is mati. Mati means the buddhi. In this context, mati means buddhi, the intellectual thoughts. So when I listen, how I engage my intellect, it is in determining the essence I engage my buddhi. To understand the logic. Where there is logic, we have to understand logic. Where there is a revelation, we have to understand with Shraddha. And remember, Shraddha is an intellectual quality. It is belief reinforced with conviction. Shraddha is not a blind quality. There is nothing called blind faith. There is only blind belief. So what is the reasoning? Why something is being said? If I grasp it at that moment, then only I will be able to do reflection if I need to do reflection. If I don't grasp it at that moment, then again I have to again go back to some notes or some article or something I have to read or listen again. Then I will be able to reflect. So engaging the intellect means understanding the logic, where there is a logic, and understanding certain things which cannot be proved by logic, but on the basis of Shraddha. Like if we say there is there are the 7 higher worlds, 7 lower worlds. We can give only to a certain extent some logic, but otherwise it has to be accepted through Shraddha only. Even this Siddhant that just by listening one can realize also has to be accepted finally by Shraddha. So Buddhi involvement means to bring logic into place as well as to bring faith wherever it is required, so that we get conviction. The result of both this is I at least get certain clarity and conviction that yes, this is possible. There may still be doubts, but at least I've heard the logic, I have understood, I have Shraddha, I am listening with faith. So that is called Sunahu tat man, mati, and third is chit. Chit here means chitta. Chit here does not mean the chit of Sachidanand. Chit here means chitta, memory, not consciousness, memory. How to bring memory and listen? So that's a little unique interpretation there. We don't have to bring memory, we have to remove memory. Sunahu tat man mati chit lai. Chit here means memory, meaning you remember what you listen. That is one part, so that you can remember. But it also means don't let the memory interfere. Don't let memory interfere means psychological memory is what I'm talking. I'm not saying functional memory. Suppose you remember that last class this was said and this class this is said. So there is some contradiction here. That is not a problem. That is a functional memory which I must remember. If I keep erasing my memory, what happened in last class I don't remember at all, then I can't build my knowledge. Many people come like that to class, clean slate, no idea what was discussed in the previous class, so that logical thought development doesn't happen. And sometimes after years and years of doing so many texts, the same question is still there, which should have got cleared by now, but it will be there. Why? Because that thought development was not proper. Somewhere there are gaps, leaks. So bringing the memory means what? Ensuring that I remember so that I build my logical thought flow. And second is, don't allow memory, psychological memory to interfere, which is memory of pleasure. See, the what we call the favorable memories, they create desire for in our mind. So let us say if I've enjoyed something very much. Now suppose the sevak or sevika in the class is giving some example of some black forest pastry. Now my mind went from Vedant to some cafe, somewhere I met somebody, I ate this chocolate, so nice it was. Now my condition is pathetic, I got diabetes, I'm not able to eat this chocolate. How nice it would be if I eat. Where am I sitting? In the study class. Then listening is not happening because the interference of the memory has happened, where the memory has now led me to a desire for sense enjoyment. So a favorable memory will create a desire for enjoyment, and unfavorable or a painful memory will create disturbance and pain. So fear. So fear and desire for pleasure are products of memory. So I don't like something, or I dislike it, or I dislike a person. Now that memory has come, then I feel disturbed, I feel fear, I feel insecurity, all those emotions mind will go into. So again, the listening gets broken. So these three things one should not allow them to interfere and use them properly. So engage the emotion, build the logical thought flow and have Shraddha in the revelation, and ensure that our desire for pleasure and desire for, the fear of pain doesn't interfere while we are listening. That mind, which is, so integrated, when it listens carefully, either it will realize immediately or it will take in everything so much clearly that mananam becomes more easy after that. So the logical consequence of Shravanam is what Gurudev used to say, Shravanam removes the possibility what we say is I don't know. Shravanam removes I don't know because it reveals the knowledge. Mananam removes I can't understand. And Nididhyasan removes I don't experience. In Kindle Life, Gurudev explains this very beautifully. I don't know. Before I came to Vedant, before I heard Vedant, I did not know that there is a self. Now, at least through listening, I have come to know that. But I still have doubt, how can I be self? So if I have understood, at least through Shravanam, that there is a self, and I have understood some logic, reasoning behind it, now I will use that to do Mananam. So Shravanam part, this much I wanted to share. If there are any doubts about Shravanam, you can ask now. Otherwise, we go to Mananam. I am going to share one video here, which is about listening. It's a very nice TED talk. Okay.
We are losing our listening. We spend roughly 60% of our communication time listening, but we're not very good at it. We retain just 25% of what we hear. Now, not you, not this talk, but that is generally true. Let's define listening as making meaning from sound. It's a mental process, and it's a process of extraction. We use some pretty cool techniques to do this. One of them is pattern recognition. So in a cocktail party like this, if I say, David, Sarah, pay attention, some of you just sat up. We recognize patterns to distinguish noise from signal, and especially our name. Differencing is another technique we use. If I left this pink noise on for more than a couple of minutes, you would literally cease to hear it. We listen to differences, we discount sounds that remain the same. And then there is a whole range of filters. These filters take us from all sound down to what we pay attention to. Most people are entirely unconscious of these filters, but they actually create our reality in a way because they tell us what we're paying attention to right now. I'll give you one example of that. Intention is very important in sound, in listening. When I married my wife, I promised her that I would listen to her every day as if for the first time. Now that's something I fall short of on a daily basis. But it's a great intention to have in a relationship. But that's not all. Sound places us in space and in time. If you close your eyes right now in this room, you're aware of the size of the room from the reverberation and the bouncing of the sound off the surfaces. And you're aware of how many people are around you because of the micro noises you're receiving. And sound places us in time as well, because sound always has time embedded in it. In fact, I would suggest that our listening is the main way that we experience the flow of time from past to future. So, sonority is time and meaning, a great quote. I said at the beginning, we're losing our listening. Why did I say that? Well, there are a lot of reasons for this. First of all, we invented ways of recording. First, writing, then audio recording, and now video recording as well. The premium on accurate and careful listening has simply disappeared. Secondly, the world is now so noisy, with this cacophony going on visually and auditorily, it's just hard to listen. It's tiring to listen. Many people take refuge in headphones, but they turn big public spaces like this, shared soundscapes, into millions of tiny little personal sound bubbles. In this scenario, nobody's listening to anybody. We're becoming impatient. We don't want oratory anymore, we want sound bites. And the art of conversation is being replaced, dangerously, I think, by personal broadcasting. I don't know how much listening there is in this conversation, which is sadly very common, especially in the UK. We're becoming desensitized. Our media have to scream at us with these kind of headlines in order to get our attention. And that means it's harder for us to pay attention to the quiet, the subtle, the understated. This is a serious problem that we're losing our listening. This is not trivial, because listening is our access to understanding. Conscious listening always creates understanding, and only without conscious listening can these things happen. A world where we don't listen to each other at all is a very scary place indeed. So I'd like to share with you 5 simple exercises, tools you can take away with you to improve your own conscious listening. Would you like that? Good. The first one is silence. Just 3 minutes a day of silence is a wonderful exercise to reset your ears and to recalibrate so that you can hear the quiet again. If you can't get absolute silence, go for quiet. That's absolutely fine. Second, I call this the mixer. So even if you're in a noisy environment like this, and we all spend a lot of time in places like this, listen in the coffee bar to how many channels of sound can I hear? How many individual channels in that mix am I listening to? You can do it in a beautiful place as well, like a lake. How many birds am I hearing? Where are they? Where are those ripples? It's a great exercise for improving the quality of your listening. Third, this exercise I call savoring, and this is a beautiful exercise. It's about enjoying mundane sounds. This, for example, is my tumble dryer. It's a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I love it. Or just try this one on for size. Wow. So mundane sounds can be really interesting if you pay attention. I call that the hidden choir. It's around us all the time. The next exercise is probably the most important of all of these. If you just take one thing away, this is listening positions. The idea that you can move your listening position to what's appropriate to what you're listening to. This is playing with those filters. You remember I gave you those filters at the beginning? It's starting to play with them as levers, to get conscious about them and to move to different places. These are just some of the listening positions or scales of listening positions that you can use. There are many. Have fun with that. It's very exciting. And finally, an acronym. You can use this in listening, in communication. If you're in any one of those roles, and I think that probably is everybody who's listening to this talk. The acronym is RASA, which is the Sanskrit word for juice or essence. And rasa stands for receive, which means pay attention to the person, appreciate, making little noises like, oh, okay. Summarize, the word so is very important in communication, and ask questions afterwards. Now, sound is my passion, it's my life. I wrote a whole book about it, so I live to listen. That's too much to ask for most people. But I believe that every human being needs to listen consciously in order to live fully, connected in space and in time to the physical world around us, connected in understanding to each other, not to mention spiritually connected, because every spiritual path I know of has listening and contemplation at its heart. That's why we need to teach listening in our schools as a skill. Why is it not taught? It's crazy. And if we can teach listening in our schools, we can take our listening off that slippery slope to that dangerous, scary world that I talked about and move it to a place where everybody is consciously listening all the time, or at least capable of doing it. Now, I don't know how to do that, but this is TED. And I think the TED community is capable of anything. So I invite you to connect with me, connect with each other, take this mission out, and let's get listening taught in schools and transform the world in one generation to a conscious listening world, a world of connection, a world of understanding, and a world of peace. Thank you for listening to me today.
That was Justin Berry. It's beautiful talk. You want to find on TED, you can find it, listen to it again. Such simple, nice tips he gave on 5 ways, 5 points to apply to listen and how important and effective it is. Now, that is about listening. Now we go to Mananam, is reflection. Please remember this, again I'm repeating, you know it, but Shravanam, if it is done properly, then Mananam can happen properly. If Mananam happens properly, then only Nididhyasana can happen properly. It is not possible to do otherwise. There are people who don't listen properly and then they want to reflect. It cannot work like that. Listening has to be a very, very important part of it. Now, what is Mananam? See, Mananam is from the word man. Man means to think. Man manute means to think, to reflect. In this context here, Mananam means the ability to use logic and reflect, especially about certain things which are subtle, which Vedanta tells us, which are not easy to just listen and immediately we will understand it. We need proper understanding, and especially we should remember this, that when we speak in Vedanta, we are talking about listening, not just to anything. Yes, we can apply to many aspects of Vedanta as well as life, but specifically Shravanam means listening to Mahavakya. And so Mananam also means reflecting on the Mahavakya. What is the Mahavakya? The statement that reveals the identity of the individual and the Supreme. Jiva Brahma Aikya. That statement which reveals this is called Mahavakya. So actually listen, reflect, contemplate applies to the Mahavakya. And yes, one more thing I forgot about listening is when we want to realize the truth, then listening from a realized teacher is the main means. In the Kathopanishad this comes, Ananya Prokte Gatiratra Nasti. One has to listen to a realized person. Listening need not mean only through words, that is definitely the best way. But listening also can be through the words which we read. Because the person who has said it, there is a feeling behind that. There is a power behind that. That will definitely influence us. So listen to a realized person, the Mahavakyas, and then reflect on those Mahavakyas. So now this reflection, how does it happen? What reflection uses is called logic. And logic is, basic definition of logic is the relationship between cause and effect. That why something happened or why something is said. What is the cause behind it? What is the reasoning behind it? So that rational way of thinking is what we call reflection and mananam. Now in that, logic is a double-edged sword. You can prove something by logic, you can disprove it also by logic. So in Vedanta, we have to use the logic which is prescribed by the scripture. In Sadhana Panchakam, Shankaracharya ji says, Shruti Matas Tarkonu Sandhiyatam. Reflect based on the scriptural logic. Now this reflection is very important because, as I said, if we are not Uttam Adhikari, then reflection has to be done by us, because knowledge takes place in 4 stages. 25% by listening to a teacher, 25% by one's own reflection, 25% by discussion with the co-students, and 25% by time it will happen. These 2 aspects which come as point 2 and 3, 25% one's own reflection, 25% group discussion with co-seekers, that is called mananam. Individual and group mananam it is called. And that's how you see Gurudev created this forum of the study groups, Devi groups. Because when we listen to a teacher or we read the commentary, we reflect by ourselves, no doubt it is very important, but that constitutes 50%. The next 25% comes from group reflection. Because then we start understanding the other viewpoints of the same thing, or we may not have understood it in its full depth. Somebody is able to bring out much more depth of the same thing. And that's why group discussion is important. A study group is meant for group discussion. It is not meant for lecture and listening. It is meant for group reflection. That's the purpose of the study group. So this reflection individually as well as on the group, in the group, must happen using scriptural logic. That what is the scripture saying about this? Why is this statement made? So there are 3 steps in general in reflection. First step is called the statement that we have to reflect upon. Pratigna is the statement that the scripture has made or the realized master has made. Second is hetu. What is the reasoning behind it? Third is drishtanta. Are we able to see an example of that, maybe in our personal life, maybe in the life of others or in the world around us. If something passes the test of logic and experience, then it has to be considered true. Please remember, it need not be my experience only. It can be experience of other people, what they call as vicarious experience, or the experience of the society around us, that we find an example, yes, this is there. Then that is considered valid. That statement is considered valid, and all doubts can be sorted, cleared based on this. That what is my doubt statement? Step 1. Suppose example, there is no happiness in the world outside. People tell us the opposite. People say happiness is in this object, that object. Media tells us, advertisements tell us, films tell us. Everything is telling us the opposite, saying if you don't eat this, you have missed out something. If you don't go there, you have lost something. You must enjoy this, you must become like that. Vedanta is saying there is no happiness out there. So now that is a statement. What is the logic? Why it is saying there is no happiness there? Logic is there is temporary pleasure there, but there is no permanent happiness there, because everything is momentary. It changes. So one point. That point, is it proved by example? Yes, we see things around changing. We see the happiness that we experience also reducing. So that is one aspect. Second logic is what? If happiness was a part of the object, then everybody should have had the same experience. That's the second logic. And what is the practical experience? We are seeing that not everybody responds to the object in the same way. Third logic is, at least I should have the same experience. Forget other people. Same object, if I interact 10 times, I should have same experience if happiness is there. Again, so that is a logic. But I don't see that happening. So definitely happiness is not there in the world outside. Deep down, my feeling may still be happiness is out there. At least I must get intellectual conviction that it is not there. So if determining the essence is the result of Shravanam, intellectual conviction and clarity without any doubts is the result of Mananam. Without this intellectual conviction, it will not become my experience. The process of transforming knowledge to conviction is called reflection. When we listen, we may get knowledge, but it will become my conviction only when I reflect properly on it. And what is the meaning of that conviction then? I am ready to let go of my false notion that I had till now. If my reflection is giving me certain conviction, but my false notion intellectually I still hold on to, that means either I have not reflected properly or I have an attachment to that notion which I don't want to let go. So if I am intellectually convinced that yes, happiness is not in the world outside, but one part of my intellect still says it is not there in 90% of the world, but in this 10% it is there. You know, in Bhelpuri it is there. All said and done, Swamiji, Bhelpuri if you eat, you know, and this particular person, the way they make that Bhelpuri is so amazing, you know. You will forget all your Vedanta and you will say, where is happiness is there in this Bhelpuri only. You come with us one day, we will take you. And there are people who tell me all this. So instead of me telling them and taking them to Brahman, they take me to Bhelpuri. So the point is that if I am attached to those few things, then I will not be fully convinced. Now that is either I have not reflected properly or I have reflected but I have held on to some attachment that no, this I can't let go. Which is what we call as our comfort zones in some other language. It's my comfort zone. I don't want to break out of that comfort zone. Apart from that, you tell me anything, but don't threaten this comfort zone of mine. So then reflection has to be Shruti Matas Tarkonu Sandhiyatam. It must give me conviction, and it also must lead to dropping of the false notion. Intellectually, please remember, experientially, sometimes it is Nididhyasan only which will help. For deeper things like I am the body, intellectually, if I know that I am the body, I am not the body, then the body still may go through some pain or suffering, or even the positive aspects. So some fitness, health goals I achieve. If I am understanding very clearly, I am convinced I am not the body, then that pleasure and pain of the body, I will be at least intellectually able to disassociate and say I am a witness. Or my craving for pleasure will not increase, and my suffering in pain will not increase, because I know I am not this. This is a tool. This is not me. By habitual error of the past, I may still feel I am it. So now and then that identification will still come. That will go by Nididhyasa. But intellectually, there is no contrary knowledge that I am still the body. Intellectually, there is clarity that I am not the body at all. So the removal of contrary knowledge is what we say is the conviction. That is what Mananam has to do. And that not only Mananam will bring that conviction, but I must have willingness to let go of the old notion. That is the big issue. This happens in everything. I'm not only talking about Vedanta now. You think about it, intellectually we know. So everybody knows or not intellectually that smoking is injurious to health, drinking is bad for the health. Why are we not stopping it? If one says, my body has got addicted to it, so withdrawal symptoms will happen if I stop it, that is the habitual error of the body. That is a different thing. But my attachment to it still retains in some part of the intellect and my mind, that I still want it. I know its harmful effect, but I want it. Then my Mananam is not effective. Or I have given more priority to my attachment. So now I'm not able to leave that. So if there is a contradiction between my knowledge and my behavior, I should ask myself, is there a problem of conviction, or is there a problem of attachment that I am not willing to let go? Most often it is both. And in that, most often attachment is the bigger reason. Because there are so many reasons for that attachment. Even if one knows that alcohol is bad, now it has become like a, let us say, a social, what is it called? We gather together and drink socially. Now it's a social habit. Now if one doesn't drink in that group, that one, people will say, "Arey, doodh pita bachcha hai," and all that. Now I don't want to listen to that. So then I will fall for this. I'll drink. Or someone will say, what is wrong? This much you only know. 1 peg a day is good. Moderation in everything. There's no extremities. Okay, drink. So many reasons why each one has their own reasonings. Now I'm protecting all those reasonings with my attachment. So even if some conviction is there intellectually, this is what we call as appearance of conviction. It is not true conviction, because the true conviction will lead to full transformation. Like fire is hot. If I touch fire, I will be burnt. Now that is a full conviction. There is no contrary knowledge there. And nobody likes to get burnt. So they will not say, "Chalo, ek baar chhu ke dekh lenge." No, once one has learned, finish. It is there all the time. Or poison will lead to death. Very clear. So one doesn't want to attempt also. In these two examples, it is very clear to us, because there is no attachment, habit, etc. But in other things, we have all justifications, attachments, so those things continue. So how to do Mananam is this: use scriptural logic, use experiential proof, come to individual convictions, identify what is my attachment, and be ready to let go and transform the behavior. This is individual sadhana. Similar thing you have to do in the group. If we are trying to find a reasoning for something, we should also first find out what is the source of this reasoning. Scriptural source or a source like a realized person is most safe, time tested, and without any vested interest. That is a very important point to understand. In logic, there are people who can use logic with a vested interest, and we will be convinced also. But it will not lead to proper result. That's why the important point is to stick to the scriptural logic, especially in spiritual matters. Now tell me one more simple point. Like Gurudev used to say, if you have a, let us say, medical problem, you have loose motions, will you go to a lawyer? You will not go to a lawyer. He used to joke, he used to say, what will the lawyer do maximum? He'll tell you file a petition. What else can he do? You have loose motions, you go to lawyer, he'll tell you file a petition. So you don't go for law to a doctor, you don't go for medical problem to lawyer, you go to that particular expert, right? In spiritual matters, who is the authority? Can science be the authority for spiritual matters? Think about it. We want to measure everything through rationality, and our parameter of determining that is science. I am scientific. Science itself is evolving, number one. Science itself has its limitation because it is dependent on perception. We are talking here something which is very different. So for spiritual matters, who is the authority? The time-tested wisdom of the Vedantic scriptures as well as the realized masters. They are the authority. I am not saying don't use any other means, but first go to this. What we do is we try to get some parallels of science to get ourselves convinced that Vedanta also is scientific. Initially, it may apply, it will help some people so that they start studying Vedanta. So there is no problem with that. But if one continues only that way, I know many people who have dropped out of Vedanta because after a point they say, oh, this involves faith, this involves many things which are not scientific, so I can't continue this. How much of science itself have we seen? Think about it. Big Bang happened. Who? Did you see Big Bang? And what the people have said, do you know how many scientists, what they have said? They themselves have gone back on that. I forget the topic. You can see that movie, The Theory of Everything. In that, the thesis which Stephen Hawking pursued and on the basis of which he got the doctorate, after he became a doctor and he proceeded in his research, that very thesis he falsified, saying it is false, it is not right. So the scientist also is evolving in the thought process. That is why we call there are scientific blinders. One should not have any type of blinder, neither scientific blinder nor a religious blinder, not our own emotional blinder, none of the blinders. That's why the truth is seen as it is. If you remove all the blinders, then only truth is visible. So if I want to do mananam, I have to go back to scriptures. That's why he says Shrutimatas tarkonu sandhiyatam dustarkat suviramyatam. He said, don't give into fallacious logic. This fallacious logic is this, where any means will be utilized just to prove one's point. Like how they say, it's very simple logic it is. A loves B, B loves C, so A loves C. It is very logical, but it does not mean that A loves C, Baba. It's a fallacious logic. So logic can be fallacious, it can be true. That's why we have to go on time-tested logic. Now, one more point to understand here is logic, as far as self, God realization is concerned can only be supportive logic. It cannot be proving logic. Supportive logic can only indicate to us that if you contemplate in this direction, you will realize the truth. It cannot prove. One cannot show, like Gurudev used to say, you cannot show God in a test tube. This is God. It is not available for direct perception. And even using logic, I may use logic and say God exists, and I may use logic and say God does not exist. But it makes no difference to me if I don't contemplate properly and turn my attention within. So God is beyond logic, and that's why the scriptures and Upanishads, they say, Naisha Tarkena Matirapaneya. This truth cannot be realized through logic. We can only use logic as a supportive means to lift us to the levels or the boundary of the intellect. Gurudev used to say that you can come up to the edge of the intellect using logic through reflection. But the transcendental leap has to happen only through nididhyasana. So if somebody says, I have done a lot of reflection, but I'm not experiencing it, so it's not practical. It will become practical only when I meditate, contemplate, as far as self-realization is concerned. In other things, as I said, we have to drop our attachments, get more conviction, and live by those convictions without compromise, which is what is called intellectual honesty by Gurudev. In Satyam Ahimsa Brahmacharya, the word Satyam means intellectual honesty, where I don't compromise with my convictions. And that intellectual honesty is what leads that person to the truth. Nisargadatta Maharaj's Guru came to him from the mountains, from the Himalayas. He doesn't know his Guru at all. He was a simple shopkeeper, provision stores he had in Bandra, and he was doing his duties. The Guru comes to his house, knocks at his door. He says, can I stay with you for a few days? And Nisargadatta Maharaj welcomes him. Every day he used to go do his work in the office, in the shop, and evening they used to have satsang. Guru stayed with him for a few days. And when the Guru went, Guru said, refuse to believe that you are this body. You are not this body. You are not this individual. Guru went. He has never met his Guru after that. But he took that statement of the Guru to his heart. He said, I will live this uncompromisingly, realize the truth. That's the power of Shraddha also, and that's the power of living the knowledge uncompromisingly. So it's not about books and volumes that we read. It is how much we live uncompromisingly by that statement. What the Guru said, I will live uncompromisingly, it will lead that person to the truth. So Mananam will bring us this conviction, our attachments and hidden comfort zones, we are ready to drop, and we put that effort, that is sadhana. Then it will lead to nididhyasana, where we assert the truth, reject who I am not, and get established in the reality. So this is one topic about Shravanam and Mananam. Any doubts about Mananam?
Swamiji, on a daily basis, when we're sitting and we are studying and we're getting concepts and all, so there is a part of me that yes can mull over it and go through, get some questions and get the doubts clear. But there's some part of it that just says, no, this is the belief in the Guru, this is the belief in the Shastras, this is it. I'm not questioning it further.
So Shraddha is good only to have, but that Shraddha should not be an excuse to not think. If that conviction is leading me directly to the state of nididhyasana, and in nididhyasana I am able to stay in that higher state, then there is no problem. Like Mirabai's love for Krishna helps her to go beyond body consciousness and remain in that state of communion with the Lord. then logic is not required. That's why logic is only to take us to the boundary of the buddhi. If I feel I have done enough reflection on this topic and my guru said this, I have faith that if it is leading me to contemplation, then that is fine. If it is not leading me to contemplation, then I should find out why it is not leading me to contemplation. There may be some reasons why I am not contemplating. It may be just be that I don't know that this I should next contemplate. Then I should start doing if I don't know. If I know I should contemplate, I am still not doing. Maybe I am not aware of the process, or maybe I have some fears. Then I have to handle those things. If there are doubts which I am not able to resolve, and then I am saying that I don't want to get into the technicalities of all this and too much of logic and all. I just believe what my guru says, then there is a problem. If that is not happening, you are clear about the thought process, no problem. Then go to the next step, contemplation.
So in case there is a contemplation which is not happening and there is no doubt or something, there could be some attachment which is coming in the way.
Yes.
Thank you, Swami.
Okay. Next topic is how to intensify Vairagya. Do you want me to take that? Because it's an intense topic. Shravanam and Mananam, if it has exhausted you, then I don't know. Maybe some other time I should take. If you want me to take, I will take.
Yes, yes. Yes, yes, please take, Swamiji.
I should take?
Because
Okay.
this came Swamiji largely from like we know, but we are not doing.
Or we know, but we are not doing. That's what you are saying. But that we know we are not doing, I've already covered in Mananam.
Yeah, that's what I realized. That part was covered in Mananam also. But a lot of the part was, a lot of the doubts in class were like, we know, and how do we bridge the gap from knowing and knowing and doing. So then when I asked that, do we want to take Vairagya, everybody is okay with it. So I guess.
Okay. So knowing and doing is a very vast topic. There are different things which we know and which we do, which we don't know, we don't do. So that we will take up at some other point in time. But specifically about Vairagya, if we say how to intensify Vairagya, then see, Vairagya gets intensified when Vivek gets intensified first, because Vivek is the foundation of Vairagya. Without Vivek, if there is a Vairagya, then there is going to be escapism only. Vivek is the basis that what is real, what is unreal, what is temporary, what is permanent. I have to discriminate in my thinking clearly. And please remember, it is not about the world outside. It is also about this body. Because a lot of times Vivek, when we say Nitya, Anitya, Vastu Vivek, we say world is temporary, Brahman is eternal. So we only objectify it. But that world includes this BMI. So this BMI is temporary and the self is eternal. The feeling of aham, aham, aham is eternal in me. So it has to be applied both to the Jiva and the Jagat. Vivek has to be done in both levels. And this Vivek has to be done continuously. What does it mean to do Vivek continuously? As of now, we are living as a Jiva, as this individual, Mr. So and so. But for us, this Mr. So and so is real. To understand that this Mr. So and so is a role, this is not reality. The reality is the Sakshi or the Aham in me. That is called doing Vivek. So every time I'm playing a role to remind myself that this is a role, I am not this. That is called Vivek. Suppose I see some tempting object, I'm enjoying it. Again, my one part of the buddhi will say, this is the equipment enjoying, I am the witness. This is the equipment going through a disease, I am a witness. This is the equipment going through emotion of anger or happiness or love. I am a witness. That is called Nitya Anitya Vastu Vivek. Continuously to separate from the Anitya Vastu, which is coming and going, which is ephemeral, which is passing, and to abide in the real, that I am this consciousness. That is called Nitya Anitya Vastu Vivek. Continuously I have to do that. If I do that continuously, then I will have the capability to detach from the unreal and attach to the real. So the craving for the unreal will stop. That is called Vairagya. Vairagya is not running away from things. Vairagya is not going away from duties, family, people. If that requires to be done at some point, that Tyaga will happen, sannyas will happen. But Vairagya is what Tattvabodh definition of Vairagya says. Iha amutra phala bhogeshu ichha rahityam. The absence of craving for the results of action here and hereafter. So I may work for a goal, I may work hard, I have some targets to achieve professionally, I have some financial goals, I have family goals, different goals I have. I work for all these. But deep down, I know that these are only in the roles. My happiness doesn't depend on this. That comes from that Vivek. That happiness is not out there. The permanent happiness I am seeking is within me. If that Vivek is done properly, which will involve this Shravanam, Mananam, all this, then that conviction that comes that happiness is not there, so then the craving will reduce. Like how it has happened to us. It's not something absolutely new to all of us. Childhood toys is the best example for it. We have played with childhood toys, and at some point we have understood there is no happiness in that. So one has outgrown that pleasure. One may still play with it sometimes to entertain a child, but there is no craving in the heart. That state is called Vairagya, absence of craving. Now that absence of craving comes because I have done Vivek properly. That is one reason. Second, absence of craving comes when I understand the limitation of that pleasure also. What Gita says, dukkha dosha anudarshanam, again and again to see the dukkha and dosha, the pain and the limitation, both. So we don't see this physical body as a bundle of just muscles, bone, flesh, blood, all that. We see this package so nicely, so attractive and all that. So there is a delusion for it. Happiness of this body is my happiness. And I want pleasure from some object, some people, some situations. Because I see them also as only source of happiness, a source of enjoyment. Bhoga vritti is there. But the more I study books like Bhaju Govindam, Vairagya Shatakam, my Vairagya will intensify because it will show me the limitation of it as well as the painful side. So if Vairagya has to be intensified, I should first identify what are those things in which I have raga and towards which I have dvesha. Where are my attachments and aversions? Because Vairagya is the absence of attachment and aversion, both. It is not an opposite of attachment. It's not opposite of rag is not virag. Opposite of rag is dvesh. So ensuring the rag and dvesh become loose and then finally we'll let them drop, that is called Vairagya. Because raga will make me crave for that thing more and more, and dvesha will make me crave to avoid that thing. So I will want to run away from that thing. Now both will create disturbances. Vairagya is no raga, no dvesha. That's why absence of craving. So I should identify, am I attached to this person, that object, this money, this particular pleasure, that type of success, this type of fame? What am I attached to? And when we say attached to, what does it mean? On that my happiness depends. Whatever that is, I have to see the limitation of it and the pain of it, both. Suppose I am very attached to my child. Now I have to see the limitation of it. What is the limitation of that attachment to my child? The limitation is that I don't give enough space to my child. I become possessive. My child may not like me. The child may end up doing something which is not as per the Swadharma, because I am imposing myself on the child. So child will be unhappy. So now that is one limitation. What is the pain? The more the attachment is towards the child, that child's actions will cause hurt to me more. So if there are 3 children, I am attached to one child more than the other 2. This attachment to the first child, with whom I have so much more deep attachment, that will cause me so much more pain. Please remember, it's not to hate the children, it is to see the problem of this dependency. And also to understand that finally the child is an individual soul who has his own or her own baggage. They will carry on. What is the painful side of that attachment? The emptiness syndrome will happen. Suppose they go away. Now I am left in the lurch. I feel my life is empty. Now what is the purpose of my life? They went. They are meant to fly. So they went. Oh, but I never thought they would do that. Who told you that they will always be with you? No, I assumed it, In fact, both of us plan to have children so that they'll take care of us in the old age. Hare Rama. So if I have these attachments, then the limitation of it I have to see, the painful side of it also I have to see, and how much attachment creates sorrow for both. Child also is miserable, you are also miserable. In that you are trying to find some moments of happiness and love. Suppose there was detachment. You love the child, you give the space to the child, you provide the right environment, you caution the child also for whatever mistakes can happen. What can you do after that? Beyond a point, we can't do. One has to let go. That line has to be drawn. Then one develops vairagya. Detachment also comes, dispassion also comes. Same way for money, if one has wealth. How many people are killed because of money? Their own children kill them. Bhagavandam says that. Putradapi dhana bhajam bhiti. Even if they don't kill, how many families are broken apart just because of this attachment to money? Human emotions are put aside and money creates all kinds of divide between people. Is it worth to be attached to that money? No, Swami, it is my right. That person is not giving it, so I have to fight for it. Whole life goes in fighting. You fight if you have to fight, but not for money. Fight for some ideal if you require to. Why fight for money? But one goes on. See, some people may have reasons to do what they are doing. I'm not saying no for it, but the point to understand is this. Identify which are the attachments, what is the painful side of it, what is the limitation of it. Both I have to see. My own body I am attached to. What is the limitation of it? Human body has great potential, but it has great limitations also. It can work to its best only till a few years. As a child and as an old person, its potential gets very limited. Only in between there are few years where it will work to the best. And that also human body has limitations. Each body has their own limitations. As per their weight, size, as per their flexibility, so many things matter. And what is the painful side of it? It is a complete bundle of dirt, and it is a what we call Vyadhi Mandiram. It's an abode of diseases. And everything associated with my life, pleasure and pain, is finally boiling down to this body only. And is it not that this body identification only is the cause for cycle of birth and death? So one has to reflect. How much pain did I get and how much pleasure did I derive? And is even in both these come and go, how much happiness did I get actually from it? Both are momentary, pleasure and pain. They come, they go. So the more I think like this, dukkha buddhi, dosha buddhi, then I will be able to neutralize my attachments. So one is to generally reflect about the world, its temporary nature, where vairagya comes through vivek and through vivek. Other is to do particular reflection on individual attachments and cravings, and see the painful side of it. If for some reason we are not able to see, that is where group discussion, reading the scriptures, some of the Puranas, the stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Purana, etc., will reveal very clearly. So many of these stories, one of the main reasons would be to show how attachment causes sorrow, how detachment leads to freedom. Entire Ramayana and Mahabharata also, this is one of the main teachings. Duryodhana was attached to power, Dhritarashtra is attached to his son, Drona is attached to his son, Karna is attached to his sense of victimization, Yudhishthira is attached to dharma, Bhishma is attached to his oath. Everybody is attached. Vidur is not attached, and Krishna Bhagavan is not attached. And everybody who is attached goes on suffering. If they had taken one step back, and if they have seen how much sorrow this is causing and how much more sorrow it can cause, if Dhritarashtra could have had vairagya, he would have been able to save all his children, but he didn't have. Finally, Vidurji has to scold him and take him to the forest. You have become old, your all children have died, and you have been so attached, and still you are here in this kingdom of Pandu, Yudhishthir, and they are treating you well, but do you not have shame? Finally, he had to scold him, taunt him, and then he went to the forest. So this is the pain of attachment. It will harm the beloved and it will destroy the beloved. It will take us away from duty. It will blind us. It will make us weak. It will make us rigid. If I reflect on this and apply this to whatever I am attached to, then this raga and dvesha will become lesser and lesser. Vairagya will increase. Now, vairagya also increases by selfless performance of the duty. In Tulsi Ramayana, Tulsidaji says this, dharmate virati. If I have done my duty properly, selflessly, towards my family, towards society, towards company, country, whatever it is. Selfless performance, not for recognition, not for their appreciation. If they do, great. If they don't do, doesn't matter. But deep down, every single day or every few moments in the day, I remember I am doing this for Bhagwan. It is all dedicated to Ishvara. That will bring vairagya. Why? Because the more I think about Ishvara, the lesser I am thinking about samsara, and my mind automatically gets purified. Because I don't brood over samsara, why this person didn't do this for me, why this person should do this for me. I don't brood, because I say I am doing my duty towards the Lord. If they respond, great. If they don't respond, doesn't matter. I am doing my duty. In that, if I feel that this is creating much disturbance, I withdraw from my duty also to think about Bhagwan, not to think about people. Either ways, whether I do my duty or withdraw from duty for whatever reasons, my focus is on Bhagwan. Then vairagya will increase. So dharmate virati. Dharma will bring more and more vairagya to us. And reflecting on some of the most difficult moments of life also can bring vairagya. Like the death of a near and dear one. If I reflect intensely on it, it can bring vairagya, that what am I running behind? Like how Buddha, he saw, he saw the old man, sick person, dead person, and he reflected more and more on it. He said, this is what life is. Then it is not worth running behind temporary things, because they are anyway going to go. So if I reflect more and more on the most difficult parts of life, like right now COVID is there, if you just see the pandemic and what all the stark reality is so evident to us, that is this the samsara that we want to come back again, where people don't value life, they don't value concern, humanity, nothing. In this crisis, they are exploiting people, increasing the money of the medicines and not giving oxygen and cutting oxygen and what not is happening. Doing all kinds of hodgepodge with the numbers, figures, and so many vested interests at play. No, Swamiji, we look at all the bright side only. All the time we keep looking at bright side. See, Vairagya doesn't mean we look only at pessimistic side. But we should not be blinded by the bright side that we don't see the reality. Now, what is the reality of the samsara? Truth is hidden completely. All kinds of false propaganda, vested interests, and things are going on and on and on. Now, who wants to come back to this samsara? No, Swami, we want to come back. Continue, Baba. Best wishes to you. Please come. No problem. If you want to, Bhagwanto is ready to give birth. But if I reflect more and more on the samsara, then one understands what is this? Why am I going to come back here? It is a living hell right now. There's no need to go to hell later on. No, Swamiji, you are talking very pessimistically. Our life is beautiful. Congratulations, Baba. Continue. Life is happy, then nice. It is grace of Bhagwan only. I'm not saying everybody should go through suffering, but you look at the life. My life may be beautiful, but in general, let us see the life. How much sorrow and suffering is there all around? People don't have food to eat. There's no water to drink. There's no house. What all goes on? Look at the stark contrast in the whole world. And compassion is not there. Everybody talks about love and all that, but they will not stop eating non-vegetarian, keep chopping the animals. Oh, global warming, climate change, this, that, everything one will say. I am an activist for that, but non-veg I can't stop. Arey, that is the cause, second major cause of global warming is non-vegetarian food. No, that I can't stop. 2 inches of tongue, you take the life of a living being. Think about it. You know, so many these cartoons, they come nowadays. Just reverse the position of animal and man. Very powerful those cartoons are. How animals look at us if we are in their position, pathetic it is. We don't want to go through any of that, what we make the animals go through, but we will do that to them. Is that not hypocrisy? So we can close our eyes to every suffering in the world and live in one, what is it called? Bubble. Anyway, nowadays there are lots of bio bubbles. Each of us are living in this psycho bubbles always. That is called samsara. Samsara means living in one's own psycho bubble. We have created for ourselves and shield ourselves from all the pain and just focus on pleasure. How will Vairagya increase then? I have to see the reality. This is painful. What is happening in the world? What is happening to this body? Think about it. What food, what water we are drinking. Our ancestors had better access to better quality food and water. We are drinking, half the things are polluted, eating polluted food, smelling polluted air, and then keep paying the bills to the doctors and keep getting admitted in the hospitals. That is our life. So if I see, open my eyes and see this is what the world is, dukkha dosha anudarshanam, then Vairagya has to come. And Guruji says very humorously, he said, you think about school, definitely you'll get Vairagya. Next Janma, do you want to attend school? If you don't want to, if you want to attend school, continue, cycle of birth and death. But if you don't want to attend school, get moksha right here and now. There are so many ways to do this, intensify this Vairagya. I am going to end with a very terrific passage that Gurudev wrote. You may or may not like it, but it is absolutely intense. And you asked me to talk about intensifying Vairagya. If you read this again and again, 100% I guarantee you, this Vairagya will increase. And if you visualize it and feel it, then to pakka it will increase. If you like it, I will share it on the WhatsApp with some of you. You can put it in the group and reflect. What does he say? This is, he has written this in a reply to a letter that somebody asked him about Vairagya, how to develop Vairagya. this is in a book called Vedanta Through Letters, Part 1. Now that book is not under print. So, what has he written in that? See, a man of true detachment will run after sense objects with 3 examples he gives. Example 1, as much enthusiasm as one would run to embrace a dead queen's rotten body, with as much satisfaction as one would decide to quench one's thirst by drinking the pus flowing out from a leper's wound, with as much readiness as one would enter a boiling cauldron of molten iron to take a refreshing bath. Amazing, no? These are not just analogies given. Think about it. The embracing of a dead queen's rotten body is for our body. What are we doing? We are doing that. No? This is a rotten body actually. Every minute it is rotting. Every morning you wake up and smell. No perfume smell will come. Terrible smell will come. Is rotting. His body is every minute rotting. And we want to embrace it. Oh, my body. If this body is rotting is not enough, another body which is rotting, hold that body, both of us, what? We will live together, love together forever. Very good. That is this dead queen's rotten body. Then drinking the pus flowing from a leper's wound. Terrible. It is only postponed. Sense enjoyment, if you leave it, they will, sense objects, if you leave, they will land up in that situation or not. No, sorry, that is if you leave a cake just like that for 5 days, then it will be like that. But we are not eating that. We are eating that cake before that, when it is so fresh and nice. Okay, very good. But that cake goes inside this mouth and comes out as a fresh product, nice product. Tons and tons of food we have eaten and we have spoiled it. We have brought out that waste product. Pathetic that is, no? And then as much readiness as one would enter the boiling cauldron of molten iron. Are we not doing that? We came from boiling cauldron of molten iron only. 9 months in the womb of the mother we got cooked. And we still want to come back next life also. And people to say that, if I am born again, I would like to be born to the same parents. I would like to have the same spouse. And I will want to do everything exactly as I did in this life. Sounds very nice. From delusion standpoint. From Vedanta standpoint, no need to come back, Baba. Why come back? Boiling cauldron of molten iron. Who wants to take a refreshing bath in that? But that's what we are doing. Getting back into the womb of the mother. You may say, Swamiji, kuch zyada hi ho gaya ye to. But that's the fact, is that this is the truth. If I reflect more on this, 100% Vairagya will increase. And if it is still not increasing, visit regularly cremation ground and watch the corpses burning, visit hospitals and see the suffering of the people continuously. Then hopefully some Vairagya will increase. But most important is ask Bhagwan, please help me to develop Vivek and Vairagya. Kripa of Bhagwan, it happens, then Vairagya comes. Doctors are seeing everyday death happening. Not that every doctor has Vairagya. So one may visit that person who is in the crematorium, is burning bodies day and night. Vairagya is not coming to that person. So these are only means. All these reflection, going to this place, or Dukkha Dosha Darshanam, all those are means, no doubt. But finally, if I want, I have to pray, Bhagwan, please bless me with more Vairagya. And want it sincerely, it will come. So that's about the reflection on these topics. Any questions, anything you want to share, you are welcome.
That was like a condensed version of the entire Bhajagovindam Swamiji and more.
Yeah.
The last part.
I had a question on the Shravanam bit. Typically, what happens is when you are listening, obviously you are invested and you're listening, you're trying to imagine. At the same time, sometimes you find yourself going ahead of what you're listening. Multiple options come up, multiple reference points come up. So actually, I think the question I'm trying to ask is, what is the skill set to develop where you're, like you said, you have to bring your, all your faculties together and stay in that moment. So what happens is, while you're listening, you're distracted. It's another matter that when we're listening, we're trying to take notes, and that's maybe a part of the problem, but that's something that you want to live with. But when you're specifically only listening, how is it that you can stay in that moment? What is the exercise, or what can one do to just stay right there?
That's why we said that earlier, that listen as though you're listening first time. So go with a fully open mind, saying, I'm here only to listen, not to generate new thoughts. Just take in, like a bucket which is empty, you can pour water, it will just absorb that water. Because it's empty, it's there, available. So if I listen with this intention, he also spoke about intent of listening. So if I listen with this intention that I am right now here to focus on listening. So even if the thoughts on that same topic come, which takes me away from the present moment of listening, I have to bring back myself saying, right now, let me listen. I can think about it later, then these thoughts I can handle. Because the possibility also is that those thoughts will get answered by the speaker himself or herself as you are listening. So what Gurudev used to tell us is this, it is there even at the end of the Kindle Life. He used to say that you read and reflect, and then you write your doubt and keep. And at the end of the book, you ask the Sevak, because chances are that through the book, many of your doubts would have got cleared. Same thing we have to apply here also. That right now, just let me listen. Even if the mind goes to some other topic, bring it back. Saying, listen, you may find solution in this itself. And then when it is over, then reflect. And if still that doubt is there, then ask and pursue that thought process. It's just about intent and bringing back. There's no other separate technique to that.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Yeah, I will share the TED Talk link. I will send it to Shruti ji. She can pass it on to everyone else.
Okay,
I had
fine.
one more question if nobody else has one. Swamiji, we were talking about material pleasures and the momentary as they may be. If you will, there is a sense of gratification, or there's a quantification of gratification. It may be momentary, it may be passing, but at the end of the day, it still can be quantified. On the flip side, what we're trying to do here, is there any measure one can have for oneself? I mean, yes, it's a revelation, yes, it's a journey, all of that, but it's still very ephemeral in that sense. It's very abstract. So while one is trying to give up the material and the momentary, and one is trying to concentrate on the permanent, are there any milestones one can measure internally, or is there any marker that tells you that my vairagya has increased? Or, I mean, is it just a personal revelation that happens, or is there something that can show you that you've made this much progress? Like Shruti said, we've all at a certain stage, this is a common conversation that happens, that intellectually we've all understood, intellectually we are all believers, but that next step of that, even to a large extent, the faith is there, but it's not tipping over to the other side, if you will.
That has to be identified in terms of what is that comfort zone I'm attached to, which I'm not ready to let go. Because there will be some attachment to some type of living, and I may feel that for me to go over to the other side requires me to leave everything, or it will bring a drastic change in my lifestyle, or it may not be something that I am very comfortable with, or maybe people around me are not comfortable with. So those ideas are there in the mind, which I have to face and which I have to overcome step by step. Need not happen suddenly one day. Step by step, one can start small and overcome certain types of fears. And it will also happen when I increase my sadhana and do it with bhav and intensity. Then I will experience the quietude that Vedanta tells us, the absence of ego, at least for a few seconds, few moments, what that state brings. And through the day also, if this knowledge has been understood well, then my responses are more equanimous, more balanced, and I'm able to have more control over my temptations. Those are all the milestones. At sensory level, my dependencies on things outside have reduced, my sense control has increased, and I'm choosing sattvic enjoyments over rajasic and tamasic. So then I'm progressing at a physical level, because vairagya does not mean absence of enjoyment completely. It means the absence of craving. So if earlier I was craving for sense enjoyments which are rajasic, tamasic, today my craving has at least reduced, and my increase of sattvic entertainment enjoyment has ensured that my mind is happy. It's not in a deprived state, but it is a sattvic method. So sense control will increase, sattvic enjoyment will increase, peace of mind will increase, bhakti will increase. So they say in meditation, Ananda Rasa you will increase, you will experience, or Shanta Rasa you will experience. Even for a few moments, you may feel very peaceful. That's a progress. Or you feel happy, just generally happy, no dependencies. You have a, what people say, feel good factor, but this feel good factor is not dependent on any reason. It is because your mind is aligned with the body, with the intellect, and there's a righteous purpose. So one feels good generally. Like health is our natural state. Like that, happiness is our natural state. So we will feel those things as we progress in our study. But as I said, these things will happen if I remove my attachments which are not allowing me to go deeper into sadhana, where I am fearful of losing something. That I have to identify and slowly work on it, and also increase my sadhana with bhav. Do the sadhana with bhav. These two methods, if we do, then I think it should happen.
Okay, Swamiji, thank you.
Okay, I think we should conclude. We are 20 minutes ahead of our schedule also. We have gone beyond our schedule. Thank you.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Nice reflect and good topic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swamiji.
Thank you so much, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you
Om
so much.
Swamiji. Thank you.
Swamiji, we'll do the announcements, then we'll say the pledge and Aarti.
Yeah.
And the Shakti. AD, can you just share?
Everyone can mute, please. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the, so this is Solahar that Swamiji is going to have. It is primarily for the youth, but at our age, we can, if you can see, we can go in actually at go on to YouTube, right, Swamiji?
Yes.
Yeah,
Chinmay
yeah.
Shivam or Chinmay Mission Mumbai, either of these channels on YouTube.
Yeah, and for the but we can definitely spread this information to the youth on Sunday. That is day after tomorrow. Swamiji is having this with the chef Amrita Raichand and Swamiji himself. How, as the flyer says, how it affects our BMI. In fact, there was a very nice IG live yesterday that Swamiji had on this, which gave a very nice introduction to this. So Swamiji, is that up on your channel anywhere or on her channel that they can have an idea of what is up?
It was there, I think, on Amrita's listing, but 24 hours later, the story would have gone by now. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, right. So this is this program. So if you can spread the word, it would be great. We'd like more and more youth to benefit what we are better
16 to
because
28
we
is
feel
the
all,
age.
yeah, 16 to 28, because we feel so much. I think so many of us feel it. I think almost everybody in class feels this who got into it later, that I wish I had known this when I was younger. So let's spread the word. Okay, AD, can we see the next one, please? So Guru Purnima celebrations Swamiji is going to have. Guru Purnima is on the 24th of July. So from Monday 19th to the 21st, 7 to 8 p.m. 8 p.m. Swamiji is, no, this is by Sevaks, talks on the Paduka Stotram. And this will, on the 24th itself, Swamiji is going to have the Paduka Puja and Satsang. I think we owe everything that we know to our Guru Parampara. So this is something that we should attend absolutely wholeheartedly and definitely. So please note the date, 24th. Yeah. Then Gurudev's, Puja Gurudev's Mahasamadhi Day. Again, Gurudev is somebody whom we owe everything to in our mission, because of whom we are getting this knowledge sitting on Zoom today, sitting in different cities. So in remembrance of Puja Gurudev on his Mahasamadhi Day, Paduka Puja and Satsang with Swamiji on 3rd August. The Paduka Puja timings were given and the Satsang timings are also given. So please do join in. And the last one, Shravan is just starting. So whoever would like to, because in Chinmay Mission, we have everything. We have the Vedantic satsangs, we have the religious too, as we understood today. There is definitely in classes also we understand need for bhakti, inculcating bhakti. So this opportunity is coming in Shravan for all these dates, 9, 16, 23rd and so on, for by different speakers. Swamiji's is on the 30th. 23rd we have Prachiti ji from Narayan Zone, and we have, and Swamiji is also on the 9th. So please do join in whichever dates you can, if you can't every time. So this was as far as Shravan is concerned. Thank you so much. Time for everybody to put on our cameras, shut our eyes, and the 3 speakers to start the pledge. Starting with Ajay Mehta.
Should we go?
Yes, let's start.
We stand as one family, bound to each other with love and respect. We serve as an army, disciplined and courageous, ever ready to fight against all the low tendencies and false values within and without us. We live honestly the noble life of sacrifice and service, producing more than what we consume and giving more than what we take.
We seek the Lord's grace to keep us on the path of virtue, courage, and wisdom. May thy grace and blessings flow through us to the world around us.
Bhisham, unmute yourself. Bhisham, you're mute again.
Sorry. We believe that the service of the country is the service of the Lord of Lords, and the devotion to the people is devotion to the Supreme Self. We know our responsibilities. Give us the ability and the courage to fulfill them. Om Tat Sat.
Can we have the Aarti? Nanda, can you unmute yourself?
This is fine.
Yeah.
आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की दिव्य रूप करुण मूर्ति करुणा की। आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की दिव्य रूप मूर्ति करुणा की। आरती सद्गुरु की। चरणों में उनके शांति समाए, शरणागत की भ्रांति मिटा, हे पाप ताप संताप हरण की। आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की आरती सद्गुरु की। वेद उपनिषद गीता को गाया, धर्म सनातन फिर से जगाया। शुद्ध नीति प्रीति शंकर की, आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की, आरती सद्गुरु की। सिद्ध बाड़ी की तपोभूमि में नित्य विराजे गुरु हमारे। भक्त हृदय आनंद स्तोत्र की, आरती श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरु की, आरती सद्गुरु की, आरती सद्गुरु की। बोलिए श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय।
Thank you.
Monica, we'll have the Shanti mantra.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। असतो मा सद्गमय, तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय, मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते, पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। हरि ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः। हरि ओम।
Thank you so much, Swamiji.
Thank you,
We
Swami.
had